If the Tuatha Dé Danann were displaced by the Milesians, and the Gael people are descended from the Milesians, why would the Tuatha Dé Danann have any interest in us at all? Well, Dag the Agus Fáilte. Hi, hello, and welcome. John O'Sullivan from the Irish Pagan School, and this is the cast or question that we received in our community. It's phrased a little bit differently, so I will actually give the full reading of the question because I think there's a couple of points to touch on that might help clarify and give a bit more of a detailed answer. This person is wondering if we are the descendants of the Milesians, who wiped out the gods of the Tuatha Dé Danann, etc., why would these gods or people serve us? So that's the question, and I'm very grateful that the person took time to ask that question. It was actually on one of the older videos where I talked about the multiple different waves of ancestry that came into Ireland. Because Ireland, in our origin story, we don't have a creation myth per se about, like, in the beginning, light and darkness and all that kind of stuff. What we have is the stories about the island of Ireland and how the various tribes and peoples over time came into, took ownership, took occupancy, died or were displaced themselves until the next tribe or people came in. And so, in the end of the mythological era, which is what this section is talking about, the Tuatha Dé Danann have been in ascendancy in Ireland for quite some time, and it is the grandchildren of the Dagda who are the three kings in Ireland when the Milesians arrive. And the Milesians are said to have been a conquering force that came out of Spain, out of the Mediterranean. They conquered the way across the Mediterranean into Spain, and it was on one very, very clear day from a tower on the very coast of Spain that one of the young sons of Mill, a guy called Ith, first saw Ireland. And then he came here to visit, going like, "What is this place?" Of course, it didn't end well for him. The three kings in Ireland, knowing that if he goes back home, there's gonna be problems. Talking about the green, abundant, beautiful island that is Ireland. And so, yeah, they kill him, but they then send his body back home. But that's enough to kind of kick off the invasion or this final invasion of the Milesians, the Sons of Mill. Now, when they arrive into Ireland the first time, the first person to step off any of the boats is a guy called Amergin, Amergin Glungal or White Knee. And Amergin isn't a chieftain, he isn't a warrior, he is a fella. And what's really brilliant about the stories is we have his expression of what he sees in Ireland in a poetic form as he first steps off that boat. And he talks about the fishful rivers, the fruitful forests, the bountiful fields. And then he declares himself, I am Amergin, son of the Milesians. And he goes through all of his process about who and how he is and declaring almost an introduction of self to the landscape of Ireland. What happens then is that Milesians begin their progress across, and Amergin again is the person who interacts with the three goddesses of sovereignty, Bamba, Eru, and Fotla, and through his interactions with them, he comes to agreements about the shift in the power change that will be happening between the Tuatha Dé Danann and the Milesians. In that one of them actually prophesies that you were always going to come and you were always going to take Ireland. But how they take Ireland is the part that's the problem. So essentially, most of them are fairly yes, okay, we're just coming like to conquer or coming to stay. It's not a coming to annihilate, and that's the first really part of that question. The Milesians didn't wipe out the Tuatha Dé Danann. They didn't destroy or commit genocide against the Tuatha Dé Danann. There was a shift or change in the power structure, but that was based on conquest, yes, and battle, yes, but also based on a certain linguistic trickery about power sharing of the island. So when we look at the story, the Milesians have agreements with the goddesses of sovereignty. They then meet with the three kings. The negotiation is supposed to be about an easy transition of power, and Amergin agrees that the Tuatha Dé Danann will have the bottom part of the island. So it's the wording is particular here. Amergin says that, and the the Milesians will have everything up top, in the north, in the up top of the island. So it's presumed to be north and south, that there'll be an equitable split of the island, but the way Amergin uses the words, it's actually a little bit twisted in that he gets the Tuatha Dé Danann to agree that everything above ground belongs to the Milesians and everything below ground, as in top and bottom or up and down, and everything down is then the Tuatha Dé Danann. So it does lead to the change in power structure. Of course, okay, one of the sons of Mill, a guy called Eber Dawn, um, He is the one who kind of says that he's going to place all of the women, children, and everyone of Ireland under his spears. And it's particularly his boat and his particular followers of the Sons of Mill that get absolutely wiped out. In one version of the story, it's by plague. In the other, they get crashed up against a rock off the coast of Ireland. And that island still today bears the name Teach, as in the House of the Dead or the House of Dawn, because he is said to be the first to have died in Ireland. A lot of the stories talk about the first to have died or first to have given judgment. Amergin is said to have given the first judgment in Ireland. That doesn't mean there was no judgment or justice before. It's talking about the Milesians' approach and their narrative as they give their judgments. And so, again, it is this linguistic trickery and his ability with words that allows Amergin and the Milesians to take control of Ireland and drive or displace the Tuatha Dé Danann out of Ireland. Now, the second part of the question is, if this is the case and the Gael people are descended from the Milesians, why would the Tuatha Dé Danann interact with us at all? Well, the last part of that story is the part that we need to look at to round it all off. It is said, when Amergin, as I said, steps off the boat, the narrative talks about Ireland being beautiful. It's abundant, it's fruitful, fish in the rivers, and fruit on all the trees, and berries on all the bushes, and everything is green, and the cows are giving great milk, and everything grows grain. When the Milesians take over, Ireland becomes a wasteland. It says that the kine or the cows, the cattle will give no milk and no grain will grow in the land. And the Milesians in Ireland begin to starve. And all of this they realize is a problem for them and they don't know what to do about it. And so they turn to Amergin again, and Amergin has to find a solution. And the solution leads him underground. It leads him to the Tuatha Dé Danann. And it's there, it is said that he has to make friends with none other than the person I'm wearing a t-shirt of, the Dagda. So the last part of that narrative, the Amergin has to go to the Tuatha Dé Danann. He has to go and in some way rebalance out the relationship that has staggered and has stumbled. And when we look at all of the process and program of Ireland's mythology, there is always this link between the landscape and the rule of the land, between the kings of the land and the sovereignty of the land itself. So you may rule the people of the land, but even the three grandsons of the Dag that were wed to three goddesses of sovereignty. Those goddesses of sovereignty function as the abundance of the island in a way, all of which is overseen by the other world. And this comeuppance that is said to come from the other world should a ruler or a king not act in right relationship, not act in proper hospitality, not act in proper keeping with sovereignty. So what has what we can kind of allude from the narrative, the Milesians came in, they made conversation with the goddesses of sovereignty, but when it came to the crux, they applied linguistic trickery to take dominance. So there was no proper healthy relationship between them and sovereignty or the island, which then leads to this other world comeuppance, essentially, as in Ireland becomes a wasteland and nothing will grow and there is no milk from the cattle. Another way of looking at it, though, is that if everything above ground belongs to the Milesians and everything below ground belongs to the Tuatha Dé Danann, the Tuatha Dé Danann did nothing wrong by keeping what was theirs, which is everything below ground. And so grain grows from nutrients below ground. Cattle feed off grain or grass that grows from nutrients below ground. And in making right with the Dagda by finding resolution and restitution, this is where we get the offerings. And it says that the first grain and the first milk are to be given and gifted to the Tuatha Dé Danann. It's almost in honoring an ancient bond with the Dagda that we still have now down to this very day. When you leave out your first cream or your first butter to the she, to the people of the other crowd, it's honoring that ancient relationship, honoring that ancient bond so that Ireland remains abundant, beautiful, and fishful and fruitful. So to go back to that question, why, if we're descended from the Milesians, would the Tuatha Dé Danann give a toss about us at all? It's because the people who came into the island adjusted and approached things within the realms of right relationship. They shifted their relationship, they shifted their focus. They weren't going to demand their way or the highway. They integrated. They became part of the collection, the collective, they became part of the culture. They engaged with the spirituality, they engaged with it, and then they made a proper, healthy bond, which has now been honored for generations. So, yes, the Gael people of Ireland, Irish people being descended from the Gael people, being descended from the Milesians, may have come in with the wrong attitude, but over time we have adjusted and we have learned, and we live in a right, healthy relationship with the other world, with the other crowd. And sometimes the healthy relationship with the people of the Hollow Hills, is to completely ignore their fucking existence and allow them be over there getting on with their business. So that's part of a healthy relationship too. So the last thing I would say about the question is they finish off the question, why would these gods or people serve us? It isn't service. It isn't that they work for us in service to us. It's about that concept of right relationship, in that we give, we honor, they honor, we respect, they respect. And so all of the teaching that we do at the Irish Pagan School, Rome follows around this core concept of core quiveness, which is right relationship. It's a translation for the words right relationship. So the concept of spiritual growth within an Irish pagan practice needs to include this core concept of right relationship. It's not about transactional, I put out offerings and therefore they owe me something. You know, if you want to get into that with the other crowd, absolutely, by saying something as simple as thank you to them, you've acknowledged that they owe you something or you owe them something in response. So there's a lot of rules around interacting safely with the other crowd, which we have lots of classes on at the school. But fundamentally, as we approach the Tuatha Dé Danann or the Aes or the gods, they are a different category entirely above the regular She, and we need to come at that with this concept of right relationship, not just transactional, not just passing fancy, not just putting, coinage of offerings in and expecting blessings to come out. It's building an understanding of lore, it's building an understanding of their story, building an understanding of who and how they are, what they have come through, what their agendas are, what their kind of areas of interest and focus are, because it's not just singular, there are multiple areas of influence when it comes to the gods of Ireland, but that's probably something I have other videos on or have talked about in classes. So hopefully that answers that question. It is because the Milesians shifted their approach. They shifted their relationship to honor and acknowledge the other crowd, to acknowledge the gods of the Tuatha Dé Danann, and made a pact with them, and has dealt in honor and honesty and good relationships since then, which is why we as the descendants of those people can carry on with that bond and with that relationship. If you would like to know more, all you got to do is go to irishpagan.school/free, pick up some free teaching from us there, grab lists of resources, books to be reading. If you want to deep dive in, we have a whole lot of classes available at the Irish Pagan School itself. So, Gaurav Mahagat for the question. Thank you very, very much. Look after yourself, and until next time, Slán. Goodbye.